You're watching act.tv. Guess who is joining me? Imani Oakley, running for New Jersey's 10th district. She has a lot to say about basically everything that are progressive values. Would New Jersey want someone who has this kind of progressive values? I think they are wanting her. I'm happy to have her on the program. Stay tuned. We're going to talk to her in just a sec. And now joining me, Imani Oakley. Hi, how are you?
Hi, how's everything?
It's good. It's good. Thank you for coming on the program today. Given everything that's going on in the world, having a roof over your head means you're doing well, right?
Yes, very much so. There's a lot going on, and we're going to get into it. But yeah,
We're going to get into it. We're
yeah.
going to get into it. First of all, you and I have spoken before. You were on the Seize the House stream that I co-hosted with Marianne Williamson, Katie Halper, Brianna Joy Taylor, and Crystal Ball the other day. It was a wonderful event, and I'm glad you could be part of it. Let's tell, for people who didn't see that, let's give them some background. You are running for New Jersey's 10th district as a straight up progressive. You were the legislative director for the New Jersey Working Families Alliance, where you fought against the establishment's suffocating corruption and unrelenting grasp of the state's grossly immoral party boss system. Can you talk about how that party boss system is corrupting democracy and how that translates to a national office?
Absolutely. So, New Jersey has the most corrupt ballot design in the nation. We are literally the only state whose ballot looks like this. And essentially, what the design is there is one long column of names that the party bosses choose. So, party bosses in New Jersey are akin to like the establishment, corporate Dems who kind of make the decisions for the party. And they choose people to go in this long column of names. While challengers, in particular progressive challengers, and I'll talk about some prominent names that have been, pretty much screwed over by the system, are placed in random places on the ballot. So a perfect example of this was the 2020 presidential elections. The party chose Biden to be at the top of their long column, followed by Cory Booker, and followed by the establishment picked congressional members on down the ballot. Now, Bernie Sanders, who, again, whether you like Bernie or not, I did. I've been a Bernie supporter since 2016. But whether you liked him or not, it would be hard for you to make the argument that he was not a legitimate candidate that should be treated fairly in a democracy. He was placed in random places on the ballot with a bunch of white space around him, no other names around him, sometimes far off to the right, sometimes far down to the bottom, because that's another problem. Some of our ballots go vertical and some go horizontal. And basically, what this creates is voter deception and voter confusion. The voter deception comes in because in years where somebody with name recognition that isn't as high as Bernie Sanders, in those years, they basically look for the most popular name, which is typically, either the governor or, Cory Booker or, if it's a presidential year, Joe Biden. And voters go straight to those names because they're the most familiar. And then they see a line of Democrats under them. So voters start to think, okay, well, these are where the serious Democrats are. This is where all the Democrats that I should be focusing on are. And I'm a Democrat. I'm going to vote down this line. Not realizing that there are Democrats in other places on the ballot, ones that will actually be better at serving you and your community than those who are chosen by party bosses because they've donated a lot of money or because they were good yes people for the party. They passed regulations that they wanted. And the second thing it does is create voter confusion. Because Bernie Sanders has such a high name recognition, and we suspect that this will actually happen in our campaign, some people wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders, but they wanted to vote for their local people down ballot who were on the line. And I actually got a lot of calls from particularly older voters who were saying, yeah, I want to vote for Bernie, but I also want to vote for like my local council person who's on this line. Am I allowed to do both? And I had to explain to them the ballot line system. It is an extremely corrupt system and a way of drawing the ballot that, again, exists in no other state. In other states, they just have the title of the office and every single person running for that office in a box under it. whether
Right.
they're endorsed by the party or not. In New Jersey, we have this ballot line system, and it really causes extreme voter confusion and voter deception. And we're running against it. We're fighting back.
Oh, that is wonderful. Do you think that people are starting to become aware that this is an issue? I'm sure they're already confused.
Oh yeah, are very confused. But my campaign has made this a part of our messaging since day one. We have talked about it in emails. We have talked about it on the phones with voters. We have talked about it on doors, and we are going to continue to push voter education around the ballot line until June 7th and through June 7th, until frankly they get rid of it. But with regards to this campaign, we are pushing it through till June 7th because right now we are enjoying a lot of support, a lot of support. And we don't want that to be ruined by people just being confused as to how to vote. I mean, we're talking about preserving voting rights all across the country. We're talking about preserving democracy all across the country. And here you have establishment Democrats here in New Jersey really doing a corrupt thing that disrupts all of that.
Mm.
And it's always so interesting to me. In New Jersey and in the North generally, we're always pointing fingers at down south and all the ballot box games that are being played down south. But here in New Jersey, we are playing our own games. We are the only state in the nation to have such a corrupt ballot system. There's actually a lawsuit going on right now. There are actually two lawsuits going on right now, suing on the basis that is unconstitutional. So, we are going to be getting the voter education out on this. We have been since day one, and we're going to keep pushing it until June 7th.
Oh, great. I am so glad to hear that. I mean, this definitely ties right in to the national voter suppression tactics that we're seeing all over the place.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, you're right. The media covers that, or at least the progressive media covers that as if it were a Republican issue that the Republicans are trying to undo democracy. But you don't really hear a lot of, and also the Democrats are keeping a stronghold on having only centrist and corporate candidates be front and center. You hear that when Bernie was running, around the Bernie campaign, around what happened and what was done to his campaign and what was done to him and other candidates who are independent. But it's just interesting that you hear voter suppression and it goes hand in hand with Republicans, and you're telling me that's not the case.
Yeah, not in New Jersey, not at all in New Jersey. In fact, some of the most ferocious fighters for keeping this corrupt ballot design have actually been establishment Democrats.
Of
And
course,
it's ludicrous. It's
they
ludicrous.
want it.
Yeah.
It protects them, right?
And frankly, it allows them to put on people and get people elected into office who will be yes men for them, yes men and yes women. So, because basically, if they were to fix the ballot to be regular, everybody would be on the same playing field. So they would actually have to run real campaigns against real people who are really helping their community, people who have really been out there and doing the good work without having an advantage. And that would mean that they would have to put people up who are independent thinkers, who know their policy stuff, who are also active in the community. And those folks are a lot harder to control than the person who just gave a lot of money to the party so they could have a seat, or the person who was a yes person while they sit on a commission or what have you, just so they could get a seat. It's a lot harder to control independent thinkers and people who are independent of that machine mindset. So they don't want to get rid of it because then they're going to actually have to run real campaigns and run people possibly that will actually work for communities and not work for the special party interests.
People were recently shocked that New Jersey went reddish, more red that they had anticipated. So I feel like I'm hearing two things here. The last election, New Jersey shocked people by being a little more red than they thought. And now you're saying that the party bosses are holding on, in the Democratic Party, are holding on to the center, not letting the progressives have their equal time on the ballot, not supporting progressives. Do you think progressives would win if that was unraveled in
Oh,
some way? Or
absolutely.
do you think it would go more red?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think progressives would sweep because I think the real problem that New Jersey Democrats have is such a lackluster amount of talent that's currently sitting in office.
Yeah, because they're actually just Republicans. They're
Mhm.
Republicans light with the occasional, they'll give you a check. You know what I mean? They're corporate Republicans.
Exactly. They're access and opportunity Democrats, which means we will, if you're rich enough and you're connected enough, you can get something good. But if not, oh well.
Mm.
And that's what we're seeing, and that's why Republicans are winning, because backwards values. Of course, Republicans have very backwards values, but they are putting up their quote unquote best talent, and voters recognize that. And
Mhm.
I would love for the Democrats in New Jersey to realize that their best talent are also progressives here in New Jersey. And that's who they should be putting up. That's who they should be putting in front of voters, front and center, who will actually work for everyday communities here.
So one of your big issues that you're running on is higher education costs, particularly because as you've said, they're a major contributing factor to the racial wealth gap. And as a working class law school grad, you have some personal experience with the situation. Talk about the situation as you see it, the injustice as you see it, and how you would, what kind of programs you would support in order to adjudicate it.
Absolutely. So I have 3 degrees, and I'm also a barred attorney here in New Jersey. And I am up to my eyeballs in student loan debt, up to my eyeballs. And a lot of the centrist talking points are, well, you should have had more financial literacy and maybe things would have been better. But there is literally no other alternative. I can't become a lawyer without going to school. There's literally no other alternative.
They
So,
wanted you to read how expensive it would be and then stop so that you didn't
exactly.
eventually run for office. Hello.
Exactly. So, there's no other alternative. If financial literacy has zero to do with it, it has everything to do with our system. Now, a short history lesson. Back in the day, and when I mean back then, I mean not that long ago, I mean like the 80s and the 70s, school in this country was very, very cheap. I actually have a mentor of mine who went to the same university undergrad that I did, who also went to dental school and orthodontist school. Okay, so he's a doctor, he's a full dentist. And it was 1K per semester for him to go to undergrad.
Wow.
1K per semester. When I went to undergrad, it was more expensive, much more expensive. It was 35K per semester. Now the average is around 70K per semester. And
That's
a lot of
insane.
people
Who's
say,
going to college? I mean, where are these colleges even getting students? Why? Is everyone so rich? Is it all loans? I mean,
well,
who can afford this?
yeah, basically only the children of rich folks, only the children
Mhm.
of rich folks. And this is something that the Reagan era ushered in. That's what I feel like people don't realize. People think that, oh, it's just because, these students are lazy that they can't pay off their loans, or they just made bad decisions as to what majors to take. No, the reason why so many people in this country previous to the late 80s and the 90s were able to go to school, go for really, really cheap, and make full-on careers where they could buy a house with their first job was because we had a much cheaper education system that Ronald Reagan ruined after he ushered it in. And now you're seeing mostly Black women affected by this, mostly people of color affected by this, and also mostly women in general affected by this, because we are, for the most part, the ones that are going to school the most. And it just makes no sense in a country as wealthy as ours, in a country with a financial system set up the way ours is, for us to be punishing people for seeking an education. It used to be in this country that we saw seeking an education as like a competitive thing. During the 1950s, it was actually considered like a Cold War type of thing, to make sure, yeah, we have to keep up with the Soviet Union, so we got to make sure everybody's going to school. And I'm not saying we should go back to that, but what I am
Why not?
saying is it does keep our country competitive, right?
Mhm.
It does good things for the country, for communities, as well as individuals, and there's no reason why college should be as expensive as it is. So, solutions. What am I going to do about it? Well, number one, I think we should be forgiving all student loans. We need to wipe them out. It is a lag on Black women. It is a lag on young people. It's frankly a lag on parents too, because there are a lot of parents who take out loans. It's not just students having loans in their names. It is a lag on our entire economy. We should be forgiving student loans.
Mhm.
Number two, we should also be making college free or cheap, similarly situated countries like our own. So Germany, the UK, Scandinavian countries. I actually have a friend in Germany that I was talking to about student loans in America and how costly school is. They go to university for free.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, and we have a much more robust economy than they do there. There's no reason why we cannot be sending people to school for free or for cheap. I know in the UK, some schools are around like 1K per semester, but still incredibly cheap. Incredibly cheap. There's no reason why we can't do the same. And so I want to fight to make sure that we get that here in this country as well.
Imani, I had a conversation with an economist who comes on our show often about wiping out student loan debt or even cutting. Bernie Sanders said he would wipe it out completely. Biden promised to wipe out $10,000 of debt. He hasn't done that yet. But this economist made some really interesting comments, and I have a clip of him speaking, and I'd like to get your thoughts on some of the points that he brings up around this issue. Now, I do want to warn everyone that the video kind of stops and is a little bit jumpy, but you can get the gist by just listening to Professor Richard Wolff speak. Here's the video.
If you're going to give an amnesty, you're basically going to say, forget 10,000 or forget 50,000. You're saying something very painful to the people who have done without all kinds of things in their lives because they didn't want to accumulate this kind of debt, who forewent marriage, who forewent children, who never bought a house, things they might have done if they let the debt accumulate, but they didn't. We ask people to have that mentality. We teach our children not to get loaded up with debt. Those who behave that way and are now looking at themselves and saying, I was an idiot. I missed an opportunity. I could have gotten this forgiven. And then I want to remind you, student debt is only one of the 4 levels of debt that plague the American working class. Mortgage debt for your home, car payment debt for your automobile, and credit card debt for your plastic. I mean, yes, the students have a claim, but don't the other people too? I mean, let me be real honest with you as an economist. Since the 1970s, we have grown the consumption of this country. Standards of living have risen, but the wages didn't. For the first time in the history of this country, the rising standard of living which we enjoyed wasn't paid for by a rising standard of wages. You know what paid for it? Credit. MasterCard, Visa, yeah, and all the rest. And now let me make clear to you what that means. Most of you that I'm talking to, your job depended on the ability of your employer to sell whatever it is your job helps produce. And the reason your employer could hire you was because your employer could sell to people who didn't have the money, but who got credit. We've all benefited from that credit. So if we're going to relieve some people of the burden, on what justification in the world could you not do that for the others? And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. I think the people who run this society would like to give the students a break for not good reasons. They hope for the votes and all the rest. But they don't do it, and they won't do it. And that includes Biden, which is why he won't give more than a small amount of money, which leaves students with still a big fat burden, is because he's afraid of what I just said. He's afraid that if the rest of the people burdened by mortgage, car payments, and credit card see what those students got, you're going to see mass movements demanding parity for them. And who amongst us is going to say that that isn't justified?
Imani, your thoughts about what was said here. You can pick any part that you'd like to respond to.
Bold of him to assume that those aren't the same people, the people that have credit card debt, mortgage debt, and student loan debt. And that once they get student loan debt forgiven, they'll be a lot happier because they can pay for the other things a lot easier. Very bold assumption, very large assumption. Number 2, the argument that, we shouldn't fight to cure cancer because, what about diabetes is extremely elementary. And we should be beyond this. I mean, that's completely silly. When we have identified a way to relieve people in this country from crushing debt or from any crushing economic circumstance or any crushing circumstance at all, and we can do it with the stroke of a pen, we should be doing that. That's the point of government. It's literally the point. It's why it's here. It's not just here to wage war perpetually. It's not just here to have its citizens constantly working to death. It's not the point of a government. The point of a government is so that it takes care of the people in society who have also agreed in return to follow certain rules and regulations.
Yeah, because it seems that the people who are suffering under what Professor Wolf talked about and what we've been talking about, all of this crushing debt, be it student loan debt, mortgage debt, et cetera, is basically, as you gave the history right before we showed the clip, it's basically because predatory lending was allowed and the prices of education were, the changing nature of the attitude toward education and the prices of education were allowed to spike. And it's the same with homes. I mean, no one can afford a home at this point, and why would you buy one at the top of the market anyway? You're just going to lose value anyway. Who knows? But that it's interesting I mean, for me, wiping out student debt is like a dream. I would love to have my student debt wiped out. I would like to have my debt wiped out before I have to start paying my own child's debt as she starts to potentially enter her higher education years. But it does seem like there are also, if we can't do that, it seems like there are other things that can be done that aren't so shocking to the American consciousness, like stopping the predatory nature of the loans, stopping the ballooning nature of the mortgage loans. There's just a lot of restrictions we could put on these financial institutions that it seems like everyone would agree upon.
Yeah, I mean, but again, my focus is really on forgiving them because I think we take these half measures all the time. We say, well, not a lot of Americans are on board, but they are. I mean, forgiving student loan debt is a very, very popular issue, not just among the left, by the way. Also, because you have people who are more moderate, who are a bit older, who are saying, yeah, I don't even know how I'm going to send my kid to school. I mean, I actually knock on doors around here and people, when we ask them, like, what's a big thing that is really important to you that you would like Congress to fix? And they're like, the cost of education. It is very, very popular. So listen, we need to fix it. We need to stop leaning into these Republican conservative talking points saying we can't or saying people don't agree with it because the data is there. The mechanisms are there. We just need to commit to doing it. And that's really all it really is going to take.
Well, that would be great. I'm all for it. um, and what about free public universities, like state-run universities, and also what about free trade schools or increasing the quality of education so you don't need 20 years of it to become a social worker, a teacher? I mean, I know a high school student who has 4 study halls in the course of a day. Yeah, it seems like there are other things we can do besides striking the debt to adjust the injustice of our education system right now.
Well, yeah. So we have to do two things in tandem, right? We have to strike the debt as well as fix the cost of education. Because if we just strike the debt and we don't fix the cost of education, we'll be right back here, in a few years. So we definitely have to make colleges free and trade schools free as well. And I think both of those should be included. Something that I hear a lot from centrists is that, well, we're not going to make college free, but you can go to a trade school. But this is America. Unless we are saying that the concept of the American dream is a complete lie and it's a completely false and it doesn't exist, in America, I should be able to go to whatever school I choose because this is the land of opportunity. I shouldn't have to, because I was born into financial circumstances beyond my control, have to choose certain schools because I'm of a certain wealth class. So unless we are saying that the American dream is a complete myth and the opportunity in America doesn't actually exist, then it looks like we're going to have to make all of the options free or cheap. That's really our options. And so I completely agree with you. We do have to make sure that we are forgiving the debt, but then we have to fix the problem of the cost in the first place. Otherwise, we'll just be repeating this over and over, and that doesn't make any sense. And again, the way our economic system is set up in this country, we can do it. We did it literally for decades before Reaganomics era. And everybody knows how great Reaganomics worked out, right? So
yeah, not great.
So
I
we
have two more quick questions I want to ask you, but they're obviously not quick. So I'm just going to open it up for your comments and so that the people can get to know you.
no worries.
The anniversary of the American Rescue Plan is coming up, and specifically, millions of Americans are about to lose their health care if we don't extend the subsidies in the ARP beyond the end of the year. Your comments about that particular situation in healthcare in general.
Mhm. Well, number one, we need to be expanding it just so we can make sure that we are keeping people on their health care. No secret, healthcare in this country is exceedingly expensive. I'm an asthmatic and I also require an EpiPen. Those two prescriptions alone cost around $600. And that doesn't make any sense. So, in the short term, we need to be extending ARP to make sure that we can keep people on healthcare so that they can need it. But we really need to start fighting for Medicare for all and passing Medicare for all. We need single payer in this country. I mean, if nothing else, COVID should have shown us how really important it is to have single payer. In fact, fun story for you. So I actually got COVID the
Sorry.
December 2020.
Mm.
And I had health insurance, right? But my doctor's office, the one that I typically go to, didn't have it on file because I had switched insurances. They didn't have it on file. So they had it as if I had no insurance. And I went to my typical doctor to get a COVID test because I was comfortable there. It's close to my house. Like it's easy. Like I know the people. Quick appointment. Nothing, out of the whack, whatever. I go and I get, the COVID tests and they charge me not only for the COVID test, but I was positive for COVID. And then they charged me $95 per televisit because they thought I didn't have insurance. Now, I don't have a choice. If I'm having COVID, a potentially deadly disease, and I'm an asthmatic, so it was really important for me to have, those televisits. They're charging me $95 for something that could potentially save my life. That is incredibly immoral. Incredibly. So we need single payer in this country. We need to be making sure that we are taking care of the health of our citizens. If COVID hasn't shown that, I don't know what will. But again, when I talk to folks, Medicare for all is extremely popular. It is popular because people do not want to keep paying these huge monthly bills. They don't want to keep paying so much for their prescriptions. They don't want to keep paying co-pays that they have, especially if they have to see a lot of specialists. So we need single payer in this country. Short term, extend ARP so we can keep people, situated for the short term. But then long term, we need to be passing Medicare for all.
Imani Oakley running for New Jersey's 10th district. You can go to Oakley for Congress to support. You could phone bank for her. You could send money. You could support. When is the election?
June 7th.
All right. Well, we're going to keep following, keep hoping for the best for you. I would love to see you seated in that big house up there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much. And thanks for the work that you're doing. I know you're running an unbossed, unbought, no corporate donation campaign. So again, Oakley for Congress. You want to go support another person who will go to Congress and not be beholden to special interests, except for the interests of the people. Thank you so much for coming on the program. I appreciate it.